So I think this video is going to be more of an encouragement video. I don't know if it's going to be for myself or if it'll actually encourage other mothers. Every one of my 6 children I have breastfed, and each one of them we have had different struggles. Michael, my first, everything was going really well breastfeeding him, and at about 3 months he was really, really small and just didn't seem to be really gaining weight. And we took him to a chiropractor that specialized on infants, and his hips were out of place on both sides, and he had 2 bones out in the back of his neck, which we kind of attributed to the fact he had the cord wrapped around his neck twice when he was born. He was actually like purple when his head came out, but he didn't need oxygen or anything like that. It wasn't too serious, but figure the cord wrapped around twice may have had something to do with, not letting those bones slip into place the way they should have. But after he went to the chiropractor, he did really well. It seemed to help him go to the bathroom more regularly, and he really didn't have any issues after that. His weight picked up. By 6 months, he was this chunky little thing, and it's so funny. I'll try to remember to insert some pictures here. But at 3 months, he was this skinny, frail little thing, and by 6 months, he was a chunky little guy. And the only thing that had really changed was just going to the chiropractor. And I think at about maybe 5 months, we started him on the infant cereal. At that time, we kind of did things by the book, by what the pediatrician suggested. So we started him on food and stuff about 5-6 months. But by the time he was 7 months, he didn't eat baby food. He ate like cooked sweet potatoes and mashed potatoes and things like that. So he was eating. I remember his first Thanksgiving, he would have just been a little over 7 months old, and he was chowing down, shoving rolls in his face. I mean, when he figured out he could eat, he ate. And he nursed until he was about 15 months old. And then Nicholas had no weight issues whatsoever. He nursed only until he was like 11 months old. In all fairness, I was about 3 months pregnant with Michaela at that point, so I was ready for him to be done too. But Nicholas, same thing. We started him on food, solid foods, about 5-6 months. And when he realized he could be up and running and eat and just go and have a cup or something with him, he was done with mom. He didn't want to sit down to nurse. He didn't have time for that. So we really didn't have super big struggles with either of them. Tried to pump some. My body just didn't really respond well to pump. So I didn't really have a whole lot of stored breast milk. But I did have enough to put in with like their cereals, to mix in with their cereals. Then Michaela came, and I had enough milk for about 3 babies. I was pumping, I was freezing, I had a freezer stocked full. We used it for her cereal and everything, and started her on food still about 6 months, 5-6 months. And it was just, there was so much milk for her. So it was wonderful turn that we had so much milk that together her and I had, an abundance, and there really weren't any issues. Everything was great. and super, super easy. She nursed until she was about 17 months. And then I kind of made her stop because she was insane. She would just walk up to me and try and lift up my shirt. I'm like, no, 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 you're done. So, I ended her journey for her. Michael kind of just gradually after a year kind of slowed down. Nicholas was done with me. I was like, okay, if you're good, I'm good. And then came Matthew, and he was the first one that I struggled with. And didn't find out till later, until he was almost 4, that it was because he was tongue-tied. But I had nursed 3 babies, and I had never had a milk issue, so why would I have one now? So I knew it had to be him. It wasn't me. There wasn't a problem with me making enough milk. Of course I had milk. And he would nurse and nurse and nurse, and then he would throw it all up. And the doctor's like, well, he has acid reflux, and we need to put him on some medication. And I adamantly said, no, I'm not putting him on any meds. And we got him this stuff called Colic Calm, which is still out. COLICCALM. And so you go to coliccalm.com, and it is like a gripe water that's made with charcoal. And so the charcoal helps settle their stomach and coat their stomach to help keep them from spitting up. And when they do, it is charcoal, and it does sting. So it was a lot of just wrap him up in a blanket, and then when we had to give him his meds, we'd have to, take him out of the blanket because we were afraid he would spit everything up. And that really helped him. Really helped him. He was about, February, April, May, June. He was about 4.5 months old, and we bought a house. My ex-husband and I bought a house, and it had a lot of work that needed to be done. And he was working as a restaurant manager, kept crazy hours. So my mom, we lived about 5 minutes down the road from my mom, but the new house was 3 doors down. So my mom would pick me and the kids up early in the morning, and I would go down to the house, and I would paint and do all sorts. I don't even remember what all we did in that house before we moved in there. My stepdad converted the garage into a master bedroom for us. So there was just tons of work to do. And my sister would look after the kids and keep an eye on Matthew and bring him down to the house when I needed to feed him. And because I was busy working, I wasn't taking care of myself. So I knew I wasn't drinking enough. I wasn't eating enough. And he really began to show signs of hunger. So at about 4.5, 5 months, I started supplementing in formula feedings with him. And I felt like such a failure because here I had just had Michaela a couple years before and had all this milk and was like, what am I doing wrong? And then realized, oh, well, I'm not drinking enough water and I'm not eating enough, and okay, it's my fault. It doesn't have anything to do with him. It's totally me. We never met with like a lactation consultant or anything because I knew that it must have just been a fluke. There was nothing anybody was going to be able to do. I didn't know I had other options out there. And so by 6 months, he was completely weaned from me and was then on formula and food. We then started him on food. Probably about 4 months, we started him on food when he started to show the hunger signs. Started him a little bit earlier than the others, just so that he could get some more nutrition. So, starting him on food did seem to help him put on some weight. And, by 1, he was eating regular food, so we didn't really think anything of it. He had gone to a dentist at 2, been to see his pediatrician for all the normal checks. And we moved from Southern Ohio up to Columbus and went to a new pediatrician. And he had his first checkup with her. And he always said a couple words funny. And we just thought it was so cute. I was like, oh, it was cute. I can't remember words he said that were funny now, or that he said differently. But she said, stick out your tongue. And he went to, stick out his tongue so she could see in his throat. And he couldn't do it. And it didn't dawn on me that he couldn't stick out his tongue. And she goes, oh, he's tongue-tied. And I was like, wait, that's an actual thing? Like, not just an expression? She's like, no, he's tongue-tied. His tongue is tied down to the bottom of his mouth. And his tongue was tied all the way to the end, right behind his teeth. So when he tried to stick out his tongue, it would bubble up. As he would try and push it out, it bubbled up because the front of it could not come out. So we took him to a dentist. They evaluated him, and he had his tongue lasered back about 85% of what they would do. And they couldn't get it the rest of the way because he had no muscle ability to lift his tongue up for the dentist to get underneath it. He'd never been able to do that before. So I remember when we got ready to leave, and the dentist was like, stick your tongue out, and he stuck his tongue out. And I cried because it was the first time he had ever been able to do that. And then he had to go through speech therapy and things like that, which he only had to do for like a year and a half once he started kindergarten. Wasn't really any big deal. Now he's almost 12, and every once in a while you'll hear a word that he says still a little funny. And so now we laugh about it and don't think twice about it. And then along came Connor. And when Connor was born, I knew right away to check for a tongue tie and a lip tie. Because, I knew all that struggle with Matthew possibly could have been averted had we had the proper kind of evaluation, if we would have known to look for it, or if, our healthcare practitioners, our dentist and doctor would have known to look for it. So with Connor, I knew he had a very bad lip tie. He had a very bad lip tie, and so I knew he was going to need to have that revised. And he had his lip and his tongue both revised about 6 weeks. And at that point, he was nursing fine. But with Connor came a new thing I hadn't experienced before, which was called breast milk jaundice. All of my other babies had all been jaundice at one point or another. They had all had nice orange tint to them, yellowy orange tint. And he was no different, except his wouldn't go away. And the pediatrician put him on a bilirubin blanket, and his number went up. And they're like, well, that's unusual. So they tested him again, his number went down, tested him again, and the number went back up. I'm like, aha, okay. I'm like, well, he has breast milk jaundice. So basically, you just have to wait it out. There's not a thing really you can do about it. And it takes about 12 weeks. In the meantime, because of the bilirubin not being processed the way it should be through their liver, they're not processing any of the nutrients and enzymes the way they really should be. So their weight is very staggered, and is really hard for them to pick up. And catch up, which they do catch up, but in those first few critical months, it takes a while. And so we were like, okay, what do we do now? So we just did the best we could. Just tried to nurse him as much as possible to help him grow. It was about 5 months, and he was 4 months, and I had a checkup, and the pediatrician's like, what's going on? He hasn't really gained much weight. And we talked about the breast milk jaundice keeping his weight down, and he's like, okay, but we gotta figure something out and see what's going on with him. And so we met with a lactation consultant, and this was the first lactation consultant I had ever met with outside of in the hospital after giving birth. And she came over to our house and evaluated him and said, part of his tongue tie is reattached. He needs to have it done again. Devastated. It was so hard to see him go through it the first time. I couldn't believe I had to do it a second time with him. So we did. We took him in and did that. She also said that she stayed and weighed him, did a weighted feeding. This was in IBCLC, in International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. And she did a weighted feeding with him and said he's only getting about 2 ounces of feeding. You're not making enough milk. Great. So, flashbacks to Matthew. Now I'm not making enough milk. What's going on? Because I was drinking enough, I was eating enough. So what was the problem? And she explained that because of his tongue tie, that his tongue couldn't lift my nipple up to the roof of his mouth. And because of that, he wasn't getting enough milk. He wasn't stimulating my breast tissues to make more milk. So he would just stop when it was done, when he got as much milk out as he could. Connor also has a couple of other issues. He had a very weak suction. He still does. When he drinks, he very much dribbles along the sides. So he had that. He also has, I never pronounce it right, but I'll insert a link about it. It's called Laryngomalacia, and it's basically a narrowing of his esophagus when he goes to swallow. So when he would try and swallow, he wouldn't be able to swallow all that was in his mouth because it would tighten. And so it would basically then flood his mouth, and instead of then trying to swallow again, he would just let it come out where he didn't have the suction. So he was only intaking 2 ounces, but I was covered in milk because he was dripping so much milk. So I had to start pumping like a mad woman. But just like with the case has been with every boy I've had, my body just did not want to make much milk for me to pump. It just doesn't respond well to the pumps. Any pumps. I've tried bazillions. It doesn't matter. And so we started going through getting him his tongue tie revision, and we then were debating, well, he needs the calories. We didn't want to start him on food until he was closer to like 8 or 9 months. Like, he needs to have the food. So we had to start him on food. And thankfully, my best friend, her son is 5 months older than Connor. And so she said, I've got some milk. If you want it, it's yours. And for about 3 months, every week, I went over to her house and picked up milk. I won't keep it together. And was able to supplement my son with breast milk that was very important to me. And a fed baby is the most important thing. Absolutely. Which is why we gave Matthew formula when he needed food. He needed something. So, if you can't breastfeed or you're struggling breastfeeding, formula is always there. There's always options. Definitely do that. But the ability, there's milk banks and milk sharing walls where people will donate their breast milk that they don't need if they have an abundance, and that is something I never knew existed with Matthew, and it has been a godsend to us. It's so amazing to have somebody willing to share their milk with your child. Is just, it's a gift you can't really thank them for. And because of that, Connor really started to pick up. He went from below the growth chart to, by the time he went in at 8 months, he was at the 50th percentile in just 4 months. It was amazing. Now he did start eating food too. And so after the 3 months that she was donating milk to us, then her son was starting to nurse less and less, and so she just wasn't making enough, and she felt so bad, and it's like, you know what, it's fine, we're okay. We've made it far enough that I think we'll be alright. He's really eating, he's getting teeth now. I think we'll be okay. And when the donated milk stopped coming in, all of a sudden everything clicked with him. He started to nurse 10 times better. His suction was better. His seal was better. Everything just clicked. And I was still trying to pump and still getting about 4 to 6 ounces a day, maybe. And he needed about 10 to 12. So it was, we were doing what we could and going through what we had, and he was nursing more, longer, and more frequently, and seeming to be satisfied. And it was just like when the milk donation was gone, my body was like, oh, okay, he still needs milk. We'll make some more. And I didn't stop pumping until he was a year old. And then I was like, okay, we made it. We made it to a year, breastfed, not just my milk. He had donor milk, but we made it. And that was my goal. And Connor was happy to just keep breastfeeding. And so he did. And does. He turned 2 September 1st. And it's now almost the middle of January. And he is still nursing. He doesn't nurse for meals. Usually comfort if he falls, if he gets hurt, or if he sees his brother nursing. He'll say he wants milk. And he'll nurse for about 10-15 seconds, and then he's off and goes. He's too busy. But he nursed through my entire pregnancy with Killian, and it was just almost like it had clicked, and now it made sense. So now we got to keep doing this, Mom. And it's been hard nursing too, because Connor doesn't understand that Killian only gets the milk, so Killian has to nurse first, and that's been a struggle for him. And terrible twos come out when that happens. So that was a big, big issue with him. When Killian was born, the first thing I did was flip his lip up and saw that tongue tie. I knew. Or the lip tie, I mean. I knew. I said, he's got a lip tie, and if he's got a lip tie, he's probably got a tongue tie. So we made an appointment in a week because we figured the sooner the better. Connor didn't have his first until 6 weeks, so we were like, we're going to get this done quickly. Well, in that first week, Killian was born. He was 7, 9. And by the time he was 3 days old, he was down to 7 pounds. And by the time he was 6 days old, he was at about 6'14". He just wasn't nursing. He was trying and just couldn't do anything. And was screaming. We were feeding him with a dropper. And I was trying to pump and wasn't getting hardly anything out, and my kid needed milk. So I went on a breastfeeding milk donation group on Facebook and found a lady who had a son who was about 2 or 3 weeks older than Killian. And no, actually he was about 4 months older than Killian, but she had had milk from when he was just a couple weeks old. She had started stocking it up and had an oversupply. So the milk was from around the same age Killian was. So it was perfect. So I drove about 45 minutes to an hour away to go pick up the milk. Thanked her profusely. Brought the milk home. We had the tongue and lip tie revision the next day, and the dentist that we had do it was the same one that had done Connor's, and she had said, given us some tips and tricks of what to do, how to help him deal with it. Put breast milk in a syringe, milliliter syringe, and freeze it, and then kind of make it a little slushy and feed him that, and it'll help with the cold, will help it feel better. And he recovered remarkably well from his tongue and lip tie procedure. Everything healed well. It didn't reattach at all like Connor's did. It was perfect. Except Killian didn't start nursing. I tried to nurse him right after he had had the procedure done, and he wouldn't nurse. I tried to nurse him right after the procedure was done, and he would not nurse. He would not latch on, which isn't uncommon. But I thought, well, maybe later on this afternoon. Because he was still nursing, just not getting much, and wasn't nursing well. So, that morning before we had gone in for his revision was the last time he had nursed, and it was 4 or 5 weeks before he nursed again. That was tough. That was very tough. Ended up having to get milk from 2 other people because he wasn't nursing. I was pumping and only getting about 12 ounces a day, and he needed about 20. So I was lucky if I was getting 12 ounces. It was more between 9 and 12. And it was very painful. we met with another IBCLC for Killian, and met with her about every 4 days for 4 weeks, I think, about that. Maybe 5 weeks, something like that. And from having the bottles, from being bottle fed with the breast milk, by the time he was a month, he had gotten to 10 pounds. So he dropped down, we figure he probably dropped down to about 6'12", and then got up to 10 pounds at a month. It was amazing. I was so excited. But I felt like I was a failure as a mother because I was having to use all this donated milk because I wasn't pumping enough. I was making plenty. I would pump, and then there would still be milk, and then Connor would nurse, and there was always still milk. My body just doesn't want to be expressed from pump, and it just would not work. So I just felt like I was failing my child. It was emotionally very draining. Sometimes it was to the point where I couldn't even give him a bottle. I needed Gary to give him the bottle because it was so hard for me because I felt like I had just failed my kid. And I know that I didn't. But I felt that way, and there was nothing anybody could tell me that would make me feel otherwise. And so if anybody else is feeling that way right now, as you're watching this, I know I can tell you, and I know that you know that it's not your fault, but just hang in there. It'll all work out the way it's supposed to work out. Whether that means your baby has to transfer to formula, whether you find donated milk, or whether things kick in and everything starts to click. It'll all work out, it'll all be okay, and you are not a failure. It's easier said than it is to believe those words and to live by them, and I know that. You know that firsthand. I figure by the time I've had 6 babies, I will have no problems making milk, no issues making milk. And with Killian, I have plenty of milk. I have never had any issues making enough milk like I did with Connor. But once Killian fully transferred back to nursing only at about 6 weeks, and his weight gain has been very, very slow. And Killian, again, like Connor, ended up with the breast milk jaundice, and so we know his weight is going to be really slow to gain, just like Connor's was. And so we knew that going into it, and the pediatrician's like, I'm not worried about it. As long as he's growing and not losing weight, be alright. So So Killian was born July 27th, and probably about the middle of December, maybe the beginning of December, I started to notice him getting a little bit fussier at night, where he would nurse and then he would just cry afterwards. And I didn't, maybe it's gas, and tried everything we could for that, and nothing seemed to help. And I thought, well, I still have some leftover milk that was donated to us when we were first having the issues. I still had it in my freezer, so let's try that. And gave him a bottle, and he sucked it down like he had not eaten in days. And I thought, okay, so what's going on now that he's still being hungry? Because after he nurses, I still have milk. So what's going on? And have realized now he's just he's a lazy nurser, basically. He wants to nurse through my letdown, and then when that's over and he has to really work for it, he doesn't want to nurse anymore. And so he will stop nursing and scream and cry. Now sometimes I'm able to kind of go back and forth. I'd stop him for a few minutes and try and burp him and calm him down, and then go back to nursing, and so he can get a little bit more of a letdown. And sometimes he will be great, and he will nurse for 12, 13 minutes on a side. And you know, that's wonderful. But the majority of the time he's not. And so I've started pumping again, and I'm lucky if I can get an ounce both sides combined pumping. My body just doesn't want to pump. And there'll still be milk there, and I typically do it after he's nursed and has gone to sleep, and then about 30 minutes later, after I know he's in a real good deep sleep and won't be awake for at least an hour and a half, 2 hours, then I pump and then offer Connor milk to help still stimulate further and to help keep the milk coming. And it's working for us, but it's hard because he still needs milk, and he needs about 6 extra ounces a day that he's not getting. And people always comment, oh, he's so little, he's so little. Yes, I know he's little, but if you saw his brother, he was bigger than what his brother was at this age. And we know that, you know, he'll pick up. But I wanted to try and hold off on food until he was closer to about 8 months. That has been my mom goal, was to hold off until he was about 8 months old. That's not going to happen. And I've had to kind of make peace with that, knowing that is not going to happen. Doing what we can, you know, to get us through day to day, but it's not going to happen. Last night was rough. I gave him a bottle. He nursed for about 10 minutes, and then gave him 6 ounces, and he drank the whole thing, and then still cried, and then woke up in the middle of the night and cried several times. It was a very rough night. And then this morning he nursed really well, nursed perfectly, and couldn't have asked for a better session with him. And he went to sleep, and he woke up and he was crying, and fed him when he woke up, and he nursed for 2-3 minutes and screamed, and then switched sides and nursed for 2-3 minutes and then screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed. While he was sleeping, I had pumped and gotten him an ounce, so I gave him that, and he sucked that down. I'm like, okay, he needs more milk. Well, I had forgotten to take milk out to thaw, so I was thawing the milk, and he started to go to sleep, and I think he was sleeping not because he wasn't so hungry, but because he was tired of crying. He was pure exhaustion. And, you know, I can't do that to my kid. My kid needs to eat. So I've got to figure out what I'm going to do. I still have some more frozen milk. So I'm probably going to have to supplement more than the 6 ounces a day. Thankfully, my best friend who donated milk for Connor now has a baby who's almost 2 months old. And she's just getting to the point where she's got a supply again stocked up, and so she's got about 60 ounces of milk that's set aside just for Killian. So again, we're gonna go get some milk from her and help this one put some weight on And I know once he starts to put some weight on and really grow, that nursing will be easier for him, just like it was for Connor. It was once he really was able to move and had more muscle tone and things like that, nursing became much easier for him. Killian is almost 13 and a half pounds at 5 months. So he's only gained 3 pounds in the last 4 months, which is not a lot. Again, he still had the breast milk jaundice that didn't go away until he hit 12 weeks, on the dot. And it was like, oh, he's white now and not orange. So, we know we've had so many struggles. It's kind of starting to be a routine with us. With these last 2 boys, they've had to go through the same sort of thing. I'm grateful that I am making enough milk this time, that's not the issue. But again, if my son can't get that milk or I can't pump it, it's not doing me much good that I am able to make it. So hopefully once he can build up some strength, that will help get his muscles working more and give him the ability to nurse more. In the meantime, I need to know, I need to teach myself and believe that I'm doing the best I can for my son and that him being fed is what's most important. And, formula fed, whatever, fed babies are just fine. Babies who start eating cereal or foods at 4 months are just fine. Even those who don't eat any food until they're a year, they're all going to grow up and be just fine. And I need to make peace with that. It's really hard because we've just struggled so much. It took so long to get him to nurse. Those 6 weeks were so rough that I don't want to give up on that yet. I don't want to. We work so hard on that together, and I don't want it to stop. But I also need to make sure I'm doing the best for my kid. So, if anybody else out there is struggling with breastfeeding issues, comment down below. I'd love to hear your stories. No, you're never alone. There's always people out there that have struggled worse than you and I, and our babies will all be okay, and we only want what's best for our kids, and that's why it's so hard, is because you just want to give them everything you can, and sometimes it doesn't work out that way. And without Connor needing that milk, my best friend probably wouldn't be my best friend. I had only known her through Facebook groups, wasn't really close with her, and I had just asked her if she would be willing to donate milk, and she was like, well, I really don't think I'm doing that anymore right now. And it's like, okay. So then I started looking and posting in groups, mommy groups, and she contacted me and said, all right, let's do this. I can't not do this for your son. And started donating the milk for Connor, and in those 3 months we grew so close and talking all the time. She was constantly checking in to see how Connor was doing. Went to her son's first birthday party, and then our families started to get to know each other, and my husband and her husband are really good friends now. Our kids basically growing up together, where her oldest is 5 months older than Connor, and now her daughter is about 3 months younger than Killian. So the 4 of them, they have a buddy too. So that's kind of been a real special thing that we've been able to share and grow so closely together. We're not really friends. We're just family now. And if that was the reason we had to struggle with Connor, I'd do it all over again. Have such great friends, and now our family in our lives. Never be able to thank her enough, and giving that gift, to a mom who's struggling and wanting so much to do right for her kid. Having a friend or somebody who turns into a friend to be able to do that for you is just such a great gift. Such a great gift. Thank you.